My name is Jack Riley. I own a scrapyard on the outskirts of Detroit, dealing with mangled steel and crushed copper day in and day out. I was living like a junkyard dog. Then came the storm. It was a torrential downpour, and I found a girl half buried under a pile of soggy cardboard. She was all smooth skin and delicate features, clean enough to be a mannequin. She was wearing a thin white dress, completely out of place, shivering on my old sofa that perpetually smelled of engine oil. She looked at me with wide, scared eyes and asked, "Sir, do you guys take Venmo?" I let out a laugh, the cigarette dangling from my lips. I pointed to the 4 words spray-painted on the wall: cash only, and no exceptions. My first thought was to toss the little nuisance out first thing in the morning. But then she was there, barefoot, tiptoeing on the cold concrete, clumsily dabbing at a fresh gash on my hand with my own hole-ridden t-shirt. And in that moment, the chronic ache in my back didn't seem to matter so much. I didn't know it then, but her hands, the kind that only knew how to play the piano, would one day turn this whole city upside down. And I would be the weapon she wielded. I dumped the last load of crushed aluminum cans into the compactor, the roar so loud it made my eardrums ache. Sweat dripped from my forehead into my eyes, stinging like hell. That's when I saw her. She was lying next to a heap of rain-soaked cardboard, looking like a discarded porcelain doll. The rain was hammering down, a deafening drumbeat on the tin roof of the scrapyard office. I walked over and nudged her arm with the toe of my boot. She was soft, still alive. I dragged her inside and dropped her onto the only halfway clean piece of furniture I owned, the sofa. Her white dress was so filthy you couldn't tell its original color, but her face was unervingly clean. Water droplets clung to her long eyelashes, and her lips were purple from the cold. I lit a cigarette and crouched down to get a better look. This girl was definitely not from around here. The women in this part of town had hands calloused from work or stained with grease, not delicate arms and legs like hers. Her eyelids fluttered, and she woke up. Her eyes were like a startled fawn's, wide and confused. She scrambled upright, pressing herself into the corner of the sofa. "Who are you? Where am I?" Her voice was soft and weak, with a tremor running through it. "I'm your fairy godmother," I said, blowing a smoke ring. "And this is the palace, your highness." My sarcasm made her blush. Her eyes welled up, and just like that, tears started streaming down her face. I didn't mean to trespass. I got lost and my phone is gone." "All right, cut the waterworks." I hated it when women cried. "You think tears are going to fill your stomach? You hungry?" She nodded numbly. I ladled a bowl of beef stew from the pot on the hot plate and set it on the chipped coffee table in front of her. "Eat up, then get lost." She stared at the murky stew, then back at me, and asked timidly, "Sir, do you guys take Venmo?" I choked on a lungful of smoke, coughing for a solid minute. I pointed to the sign I'd painted on the wall in big, red letters: "In God We Trust. All others pay cash. Violators will be scrapped." I grinned. "Look closer, princess. Not only do we not take Venmo, but we do accept physical payments." She flinched and fell silent, picking up the bowl and sipping the stew like it was poison. I ignored her, peeling off my soaked tank top. My back was a roadmap of old scars. As I wrung out the shirt and draped it over a chair, I turned and saw her staring at the longest scar, the one that ran down the side of my back. Her eyes were filled with horror. I sneered. "What? Never seen one before. Keep staring, and I'll give you one to match." She immediately looked down, hiding her face behind the bowl. After she finished eating, the rain was still coming down hard. She was shivering in her wet clothes. Annoyed, I rummaged through a cabinet and tossed an old t-shirt at her. "Change into this. Don't die on my floor. It's bad luck." She hesitated, holding the shirt with its stretched-out collar, then disappeared with it into the back room that I called a bedroom. I sat outside, smoking, listening to the sound from inside. The walls in this place were paper-thin. I could hear her fumbling with her clothes, punctuated by quiet, suppressed sobs. TCH. Trouble. When she came out, I froze for a second. The oversized t-shirt hung on her like a kid playing dress-up, the hem barely reaching her thighs. Her legs were long and pale, catching the dim light. She was barefoot, her toes curled against the cold cement floor. She must have felt my eyes on her, because she tugged at the hem, nervously. "Thank you," she whispered. I didn't answer. I stubbed out my cigarette and pulled a pair of old flip-flops from under my bed, tossing them at her feet. "Put these on." They were military green work sandals, huge and stiff. When she put them on, her small feet swam in them, making her look even more pathetic. "I'm Jack," I said, leaning against the doorframe and lighting another cigarette. "You?" "Chloe." "Chloe." I raised an eyebrow. "Well, Chloe, looks like your fairy godmother dropped you off in the wrong part of town." She bit her lip and said nothing. I ran a hand through my hair, agitated. "All right, look, You can stay here until the rain stops. Don't touch my stuff, and don't cause me any trouble. Got it. She nodded like a bobblehead. I left her there and went into the bedroom to sleep. There was only one bed. She had the sofa. I wasn't about to sleep on the floor. Lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. The sound of the rain mixed with her soft breathing felt like a cat scratching at my nerves. I had to be crazy, bringing this much trouble into my life. In the middle of the night, a noise woke me up. I opened my eyes and saw a small figure fumbling around in the dark. What are you doing? I snapped. She jumped, and a glass cup slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. I shot out of bed. She was standing barefoot in a minefield of broken glass, too scared to move. Are you an idiot? My temper flared. I stalked over, scooped her up, and dumped her back on the sofa. A cut on the bottom of her foot was already bleeding. Cursing under my breath, I dug out my first aid kit, grabbing antiseptic and bandages. I knelt in front of her and took her foot in my hand. Her ankle was so slender I could wrap my hand completely around it. Ow, she whimpered. You know it hurts, so why were you wandering around in the dark? I grumbled, but my movements were gentle as I cleaned the cut. Her skin was so soft that the antiseptic made her hiss in pain, tears welling up in her eyes again. Stop crying, I barked. Cry again and I'll throw you to the dogs. She clamped her mouth shut, but her shoulders still shook with silent sobs. After I'd bandaged her foot, I got up to sweep the glass. She sat on the sofa, watching me. Why? Why are you being so nice to me? She asked quietly. I paused my back to her. Because if you die here, you're not even worth scrap value. I'd have to pay for the cremation myself. Silence. When I finished cleaning, I glanced over at her. She had fallen asleep on the sofa, knees hugged to her chest, tear stains still on her long eyelashes. I sighed, grabbed a blanket from my bed, and gently draped it over her. Looking at her sleeping face, it occurred to me that this shithole I called home felt a little different. The next morning, my stomach woke me up. I went out and found Chloe still asleep, curled up like a cat on the sofa. I didn't wake her. I went to the kitchen and made a pot of ramen. I was halfway through my bowl when she woke up, rubbing her eyes, her hair a total mess. Morning, she said softly. I grunted in response and gestured with my chin toward the pot. There's more. Get yourself. She obediently got a bowl and sat across from me, eating in small, quiet bites. I watched her for a moment. How long are you planning on staying? I don't run a charity here. Her hand froze. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with panic. I have nowhere to go. Family? Friends? She shook her head, her eyes turning red again. Here we go again, I said, putting down my chopsticks. I pulled out my phone and tossed it to her. Call your family. Have them come get you. She stared at the phone, then reluctantly dialed a number. It rang for a long time before someone picked up. An impatient male voice barked through the speaker. Chloe, you finally decided to call? Let me tell you something. Your father said if you ever mess around with that broke loser again, you're no longer his daughter. Your allowance has been cut off. Let's see how you survive on your own. The line went dead. Chloe held the phone, her face ashen, her whole body shaking. I pretty much got the picture. Another rich family soap opera. All right, I said, taking the phone back. Looks like you've been kicked to the curb. You can stay here, but on 2 conditions. She looked up, a flicker of hope in her eyes. First, you pay rent. Second, you work. I don't support freeloaders. I held up 2 fingers. Your choice. She looked at her own soft, pale hands, then around at my junkyard, a world of grease and rust. She bit her lip. I'll work. I had to stop myself from laughing. What could she possibly do? Haul scrap metal? Carry engine blocks? I was curious to see how many days this little princess would last in my world. The first job I gave Chloe was sorting a mountain of plastic bottles. Greens, blues, clears, all had to be separated and stacked. It wasn't heavy work, but it was filthy and tedious. I leaned against the doorframe, a cigarette in my mouth, watching her navigate the bottle mountain that towered over her in my oversized work sandals. She wrinkled her nose, her face a mask of disgust, but she reached out and started. She worked slowly, inspecting each bottle as if it might bite her. Her slender fingers, gripping a grimy bottle, were a completely alien sight in this place. One of my guys, a big lug everyone called Cannon, sidled up to me, grinning. Hey, Jack, where'd you find a little angel? Making her do this kind of work. It ain't right. Shut up and get back to work, I said, giving him a light shove. Cannon chuckled and shuffled off. I watched Chloe's clumsy efforts, a strange feeling twisting in my gut. But I knew the score. Someone like her. If you didn't let her taste a little hardship, she'd never understand how the world works. Better to let her quit on her own than for me to have to kick her out. By noon, she had only sorted a tiny pile, but she was covered in grime. There was a smudge of dirt on her cheek, and her white dress, or what was left of it, was now a permanent shade of gray. At lunch, I dish her up some stew. She must have been exhausted because she ate with more appetite than the day before. More of the same this afternoon, I said, tapping the table. She just nodded, not saying a word. The afternoon sun was brutal, hot enough to fry an egg on the tin roof. Chloe's face was flushed red, sweat dripping from her hairline. She just wiped it away with a dirty sleeve and keep going. I'll admit, I was surprised. I'd figured she'd last half a day, tops, before breaking down in tears. Late in the afternoon, a sharp cry came from her direction. My gut clenched. I ran over to find her on the ground, clutching her hand, blood seeping through her fingers. A broken glass bottle lay beside her. What happened? I knelt and pulled her hand away. A long, deep gash ran across her palm, a mess of blood and torn flesh. It was in a pile, a broken one. Her voice trembled with pain, tears shimmering in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. A surge of anger rose in me, at her and at myself. What the hell was I thinking, making her do this? Hold still, I commanded, sweeping her up into my arms and carrying her into the office. She was light, practically weightless, and felt like a small, broken bird in my arms. I set her on the sofa and grabbed the first aid kit. This wound was much worse than the one on her foot. This needs stitches. We have to go to a clinic. She grabbed my sleeve and shook her head. No, don't. It's too expensive. Just put some antiseptic on it. I stared at her. There was defiance in her eyes, mixed with something else I couldn't quite place. She seemed terrified of spending money, especially my money. Let go, I said harshly. You want to lose your hand? She wouldn't let go. We were at a standoff. Finally, I was the one who caved. Fine. No clinic, I said, pulling out butterfly bandages and sterile pads. But if it gets infected and your hand falls off, don't come crying to me. I bent over her hand, carefully cleaning the wound. Shards of glass were embedded in the flesh, and I had to pick them out one by one with tweezers. She flinched with every tiny movement, but she clamped her jaw shut and didn't make sound. A drop of sweat fell from my forehead onto the back of her hand. When I was finally done, I wrapped her hand in so much gauze it looked like a mummy's. Don't get it wet for a few days, I said without looking up as I packed away the supplies. Thank you, Jack, she whispered. I didn't answer. That night, I cooked a couple of dishes. She looked at her bandaged hand, unsure of what to do. I pushed a fork in her left hand. Make it work. She fumbled with it, trying to pick up food, but mostly just succeeded in spilling rice all over the table. I couldn't watch anymore. I pulled her plate over, spooned some food onto it, and pushed it back. Just eat. She stared at me, her eyes glistening. What are you looking at? I'll start charging you for that, too, I growled. She looked down and silently ate with a spoon. The rest of the meal passed in heavy silence. Afterward, I sent her to rest and cleaned up myself. Standing at the sink, I saw my reflection in the greasy water and thought I must be losing my mind. I'm Jack Riley. I've been clawing my way up from the bottom for 10 years. I've seen it all, done it all. My heart was supposed to be as hard as the scrap iron in my yard. So why was I going soft for this girl who came out of nowhere? Because she was pretty? Because she looked so damn pathetic? Annoyed, I slammed a plate down in the sink. It rattled, but didn't break. I couldn't sleep again that night. I could hear Chloe on the sofa, tossing and turning, trying to stifle her whimpers of pain. The cut must have been throbbing. I got up, poured a glass of water, and found 2 painkillers in the kit. When I walked over to her, she was curled into a ball, her forehead slick with a cold sweat. Hey, wake up and take these, I said, tapping her shoulder. She opened her eyes blearily. Seeing me, she tensed up. Painkillers, I explained, holding out the pills and water. She hesitated before taking them. Thanks. Just get some sleep. I went back to my room. Lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling. There's a string of numbers tattooed on my wrist, my old service number from the Army. That time was the most disciplined and also the darkest period of my life. I messed up, got a dishonorable discharge, and ended up here. I figured that was it for me. Just another piece of trash on the scrap heap. But Chloe's arrival. It was like someone had thrown a stone into the stagnant pond of my life. The next day, Chloe's hand was useless, so she couldn't work. She just sat quietly on a small stool under the awning, watching us. The sun cast a golden glow around her. Sitting there, silent and still, she was completely out of place in the noisy, chaotic junkyard. Cannon came over again. Jack, look at her. Like a painting. You really not going to ask where she's from? Send her home. Her family'd probably give you a fat reward. Get lost, I muttered. Even though Chloe couldn't work, she kept herself busy. She organized my disaster of an office, making it almost orderly. She washed my pile of dirty clothes with her one good hand and hung them up to dry. They weren't perfectly clean, but at least they didn't smell like sweat anymore. She also took my ledger, the one I could barely decipher myself, and reorganized the whole thing, writing awkwardly with her left hand. It was a mess of numbers, how much scrap I'd bought, how much I'd sold it for, but she studied it like it was a novel. That evening, she handed me the organized ledger. "Jack, you lost over $3,000 this month." I took it and saw she'd use a red pen to highlight several questionable entries, with clear analysis written beside them. Which scrap prices were too high, which sales prices were too low. It was all perfectly clear. I looked at her, stunned. "You studied this stuff?" "I was a finance major in college," she said, as if it were nothing. A finance major from a wealthy family, hiding out in my scrapyard. The whole situation felt stranger and stranger. "That, boyfriend of yours?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "What does he do?" At the mention of the word boyfriend, her face went pale. "He's not my boyfriend," she said, her voice sharp with emotion. "We're done." Seeing her over-the-top reaction, I got the picture. She'd been played, or hurt, by that broke loser. "All right, I get it," I said, dropping the subject. Over the next few days, Chloe's hand started to heal. She began to help with more things. She couldn't cook, so she cleaned the kitchen until it sparkled. She couldn't do heavy lifting, so she categorized all the scrap, labeling everything with weight and price estimates. She even sorted through a pile of old circuit boards I thought were worthless. "You can extract gold from these," she told me. I looked at her serious face and didn't know whether to laugh or be annoyed. "Princess, this isn't a TV show. Extract gold? With what, my teeth?" But she was serious. I looked it up. There are companies that specialize in recycling these. They pay dozens of times more than scrap metal prices. We can contact them. I was skeptical, but I did what she said and found a company online. They sent a guy to look at the boards, and he made an offer that left my jaw on the floor. On that one deal, I cleared $50,000. I held the thick stack of cash in my hand, feeling like I was in a dream. That night, I bought some good food from a restaurant and a six-pack of beer. "You're the MVP today. Eat up," I said, putting a chicken leg on her plate. She looked at me, her eyes shining. "So, does this mean I don't have to pay rent?" "In your dreams," I said, taking a swig of beer. "This is called a return on investment. From now on, you're in charge of the books. I'll give you a commission." She broke into a huge grin, her eyes curving into crescents. It was the first time I'd seen her smile so freely, without a shadow of sadness behind it. Looking at that smile, I felt something shift inside me. Just then, the iron gate of the scrapyard was kicked open with a loud bang. Several men in black suits walked in, led by a slick, preppy-looking guy with a nasty glint in his eyes. His gaze landed on Chloe, and a possessive smile spread across his face. "Chloe, darling, are you done playing? It's time to come home." Chloe's smile vanished. Her body started to tremble uncontrollably. I stood up, moving to stand in front of her. I faced the young man, my voice as cold as ice. "Who the hell are you?" The preppy bastard's name was Julian Vance. He looked at me like I was something he'd scraped off his shoe. "Who am I?" "I'm Chloe's fiancé," he said, his eyes raking over me with contempt. "So you're the broke loser she ran off with?" TSK, TSK. "Chloe, your taste is really hitting rock bottom. Finding a man in a garbage dump." Chloe hid behind me, her hand gripping the back of my shirt. She was shaking like a leaf. "Julian, get out. I have nothing to do with you." "Nothing to do with me?" Julian sneered. "Our engagement was approved by your father himself. Did you really think you could escape me by hiding in a place like this? Don't be so naive." He gestured to his bodyguards. "Take Miss Sterling home." Two of the suits started moving toward us. I pushed Chloe further behind me and rolled my shoulders, my knuckles cracking loudly. "I don't give a damn about your engagement," I said, my voice low and steady. "As long as I'm here, nobody touches her." Julian laughed as if I just told the world's funniest joke. "You? A scrap hauler?" The words were barely out of his mouth before one of the bodyguards threw a punch at my face. I dodged, grabbed his wrist, and twisted. A sickening crack echoed in the small office, followed by a scream. The man's arm was now bent at an impossible angle. The other guard saw this and pulled out a collapsible baton, swinging it at my head. I didn't dodge. I raised my forearm to block the blow. Pain shot through my arm, but I didn't even flinch. I drove my foot into his kneecap. He grunted and collapsed to the ground. It was over in seconds. The smile on Julian's face froze, replaced by a flicker of fear. I shook my tingling arm and started walking toward him. For every step I took, he took one back. "You, stay away from me. My father is Marcus Vance, the CEO of Vance Industries," he stammered. I reached him and grabbed a fistful of his expensive suit, lifting him off his feet. "I don't care if your father is the President of the United States," I whispered in his ear. "Now, Take your men and get the hell out of my sight. If you ever bother her again, I will personally make sure you spend the rest of your life in a wheelchair." I must have looked terrifying because Julian's face went white and his legs started shaking. Let me go." I threw him to the ground like a piece of trash. He scrambled away, helping his injured men out of the yard. The scrapyard was quiet again. I turned around and saw Chloe still standing there, staring at me, tears streaming down her face. "It's over," I said, walking toward her. I wanted to wipe away her tears, but I looked at my own hands, grimy and smeared with a bit of blood, and stopped. But then she lunged forward and threw her arms around me, sobbing uncontrollably. Her tears were hot against my chest, soaking through my t-shirt. I froze, my hands hovering in the air, unsure where to put them. It was the first time in my life a girl had ever hugged me like that. She was soft and smelled faintly of something sweet, a stark contrast to the smell of sweat and oil that clung to me. "Hey, it's okay. Stop crying," I said, patting her back awkwardly. "He was just a pretty boy. Nothing to be so scared of." She shook her head against my chest, her words muffled by sobs. "No, you don't understand. He's a monster." I didn't say anything else. I just let her cry until her sobs quieted down. She pulled back, her eyes swollen and red. "I'm sorry. I caused you trouble again." "A little late for sorry now, isn't it?" I said, but I went and got a warm, damp towel for her. "Wipe your face." She took it and dabbed at her cheeks. The way you were fighting." She looked at me, her expression complicated. "You were incredible." I snorted. "A lot of good it does me. I'm still just a scrap hauler." "No," she said fiercely. "You're not like them." I looked at her, at the earnest expression on her face, and felt that strange shift inside me again. That night, she told me everything. She was the illegitimate daughter of the Sterling family, an outcast since birth. After her mother died, her father took her in, but treated her with cold indifference. Julian Vance was her fiancé in a business arrangement between their families. But Julian was a possessive, abusive monster. She finally ran away when she couldn't take it anymore. She had tried to go to her only friend, a guy she liked, only to discover that the broke loser was actually a spy Julian had planted to watch her. Devastated, she had wandered the streets until she collapsed right outside my gate. "So, I really have nowhere else to go," she finished, her voice barely a whisper. "Jack, can I stay here? I can work. I can help you make money. I won't be a freeloader." I looked at her, a mix of emotions churning inside me. This girl, who looked like she had everything, was living a life worse than mine. At least I was free. "All right," I interrupted. "You can stay. If Julian Vance ever shows his face here again, I'll break his legs." She looked up, tears shimmering in her eyes, and nodded fiercely. From that day on, something between us changed. She stopped calling me sir and started using my name. "Jack." She started learning to cook. Her first attempt at rice was a soupy mess, and her second try at stir-fry ended with a burnt pan, but she kept trying. Watching her flail around in my tiny kitchen sometimes made me want to smile. My scrapyard also started to change under her care. It became more organized. She even designed a simple web app for scheduling scrap pickups from local factories and office buildings. Business actually started to pick up. I discovered she wasn't just good with numbers. She was great with computers, too. She said she'd taught herself to code. This little junkyard was being transformed by her presence. And me? I was getting used to it. Used to coming home to a light left on for me. Used to a hot meal, even if it wasn't the best tasting. Used to her sighing in exasperation when I messed up the accounts. Used to the way she'd gently bandage my cuts and scrapes. My heart, that rusty piece of scrap metal, felt like it was slowly being warmed back to life. One day, I brought back a load of old computers. Chloe's eyes lit up. She started taking them apart, like she was on a treasure hunt. "Jack, look," she yelled, holding up a CPU. "This model processor is still worth a lot on the second-hand market." She salvaged all the usable parts, sorted them, and listed them for sale online. Within a few days, everything had sold. We made several times more than I would have gotten for selling them as scrap metal. "Chloe, you're a genius," I said, and I meant it. She blushed at the praise. "It's just basic knowledge, really. It's like a foreign language to me," I said, scratching my head. "Looks like I really hit the jackpot with you." I was looking right into her eyes when I said it. Her face flushed a deep red, and she quickly looked away. The air between us felt charged with something unspoken. Just then my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered it, and a frail, weak voice came through the line. "Jackie, is it you?" A jolt went through me. I'd know that voice anywhere, even in death. It was Mr. Henderson, the old warden from the prison. "Henderson, it's me," I said, my throat suddenly dry. "Jackie, I'm not doing so good." His voice was faint and broken. Can you come back just once to see your sister?" The line was filled with a fit of coughing, and then it went dead. I stood there, frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear. It felt like all the blood in my body had turned to ice. My sister. I had a sister whose life I had ruined. My sister's name is Luna. She's 5 years younger than me. She's the only family I've left in this world, and the deepest scar on my soul. Years ago, I ended up in prison for manslaughter. My parents, consumed by shame and anger, disowned me. Only Luna never gave up on me. Every month, she would take the long bus ride to visit, rain or shine. She always had a smile for me. "Just behave in there, big brother," she'd say. "I'll be waiting for you when you get out." But she wasn't there on the day I was released. I found out later that a month before my release, she was desperately trying to scrape together money to pay my victim's family. A foreman tricked her into taking an off-the-books job at a non-union demolition site. There was an accident, a collapse. They pulled her out of the rubble, but her legs were crushed. The head injury she sustained left her with the mental capacity of a 7-year-old. The shock was too much for my parents, who were already in poor health. They passed away within a year of each other. When I finally saw Luna at the hospital, she was in a wheelchair, looking at me with a vacant, happy smile. "Candy," she mumbled, her speech slurred. "Want candy?" In that moment, my world fell apart. I had destroyed her. If it wasn't for me, she would have graduated from college, gotten a good job, married a good man. She wouldn't be trapped in a child's mind for the rest of her life. I found the best long-term care facility I could in our hometown of Havenwood and asked Mr. Henderson, the retired prison warden who had always been kind to me, to help keep an eye on her. Then I left for Detroit, a city where no one knew me, and worked myself to the bone, day and night, to earn money for her treatment. In all these years, I never once went back to see her. I couldn't. I was terrified of seeing her innocent eyes. They would only serve as a reminder of my unforgivable sin. And now Henderson was calling, telling me he was dying, asking me to go back and see my sister. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. After I hung up, I just sat there, chain-smoking one cigarette after another. Chloe knew something was wrong. She didn't ask questions. She just quietly poured me a glass of water. "I have to go back home," I finally said, my voice raspy. "I'll go with you," she replied instantly. I looked at her and didn't refuse. The next day, we were on a bus to Havenwood. I was silent for the whole trip. Chloe didn't press me. She just sat beside me, a quiet, reassuring presence. From the bus station, we went straight to the care facility. Mr. Henderson was in a hospital bed, so thin he was almost unrecognizable. When he saw me, a light flickered in his cloudy eyes. "Jackie, you finally came." I knelt by his bed and took his frail hand, the tears I'd held back for so long finally breaking free. "Henderson, I'm so sorry." "Silly boy, don't say that." He gasped for air. "I never had kids of my own. Always thought of you as a son. Luna, I watched over her for you. She's a good girl. She misses you." He spoke in short, broken sentences. Finally, he looked from me to Chloe, who was standing behind me, and a faint, relieved smile touched his lips. "A good girl. Jackie, you let her take care of you." With those words, his hand went limp in mine. I held his cooling body and cried like a child. After arranging Mr. Henderson's funeral, I finally went to see Luna. A nurse's aide had taken her outside to sit in the sun. She was in her wheelchair, clutching a worn-out stuffed rabbit, humming a tuneless little song. She looked healthier than I remembered, her cheeks a little fuller. She had been well cared for. I slowly walked up to her and crouched down. "Luna." She looked up, her eyes vacant. They were the same clear, bright eyes from my memory, but now they were empty. She stared at me for a long time, and then a wide, goofy grin spread across her face. "Jackie," she cried out in a child's voice, holding the stuffed rabbit out to me. "For you, Bunny." My vision blurred with tears. She still remembered me. I took the rabbit and hugged it tightly. "Brother, candy," she said, pointing to her pocket. I reached in and pulled out a fruit chew, unwrapped it, and placed it in her mouth. She closed her eyes in contentment, like a little kid who had just been given the world. Chloe stood behind me, her own eyes red. For the next few days, I stayed by Luna's side. I read her stories, pushed her wheelchair around the gardens, and fed her meals. She was clingy, just like when we were kids. Chloe stayed with us the whole time. She was incredibly patient, playing cat's cradle with Luna and singing her songs. Luna adored her, constantly calling her Chloe. Watching them together, I felt a warmth I hadn't felt in a long, long time. One day, the facility's director asked to speak with me. "Mr. Riley, I'd like to discuss Luna's condition." He told me about a new experimental treatment from Europe that might help with a brain injury. But the cost was astronomical. The first phase of treatment alone would be $500,000. $500,000. To me, that might as well have been $50 million. All the money I had scraped together over the years, including the recent profit from the computer parts, was barely $100,000. Hope was dangling right in front of me, but I couldn't reach it. The feeling of helplessness was crushing me. That night, I sat on the steps outside the facility, smoking in the dark. Chloe came and sat down next to me. "I'll figure out the money," she said. I looked at her and gave a bitter laugh. "How? We need $500,000, not $5,000. Trust me," she said, her gaze steady. "You forget, I was a finance major." When we got back to Detroit, Chloe locked herself in her room for 2 days. She was constantly on the phone or on her computer, researching something. I had no idea what she was up to. On the third day, she came to me with a business proposal. "Jack, we're going to get into urban mining." "The hell is that?" I asked, completely lost. "It's what I told you about before. Extracting precious metals from electronic waste," she said, pointing to charts and figures in her proposal. Her eyes were shining. "I've done the market research. It's a massive, untapped market. If we can get the initial startup capital to build a professional dismantling line, the profit margins will be huge." "Startup capital?" I frowned. "Where are we going to get that kind of money?" "I'll handle it," Chloe said. "I know some investors. I just need you to trust me and support me." I looked at her, at the absolute confidence on her face. This wasn't the sheltered princess I'd found in the rain. This was a strategist, a warrior. I didn't know where she got her nerve, but for some reason, I chose to believe in her. "Okay," I said. "I'm with you." The days that followed were a blur of activity. Chloe drafted business plans and contacted potential investors. I worked on expanding our supply chain, reaching out to more e-waste collectors. Cannon and the others saw how driven we were and threw themselves into the work. The little scrapyard transformed into a buzzing hub of activity. Chloe's proposal was brilliant, but finding investors was brutal. The moment they heard we were in the scrap business, most of them wouldn't even give us a meeting. Chloe faced rejection after rejection, but she never lost heart. She'd hang up, take a deep breath, and dial the next number. Watching her, I felt a mix of pride and a painful ache in my chest. Finally, one investor agreed to meet with us. The day of the meeting, Chloe wore a business suit she'd found at a thrift store. It didn't fit her perfectly, but she still looked radiant. I wore the only decent button-down shirt I owned. Standing outside the upscale coffee shop, we were both nervous. "Jack," she said, taking a deep breath and smiling at me. "We're going to nail this." I smiled back. "Yeah, we are." But when we walked inside and saw the man sitting on the sofa, a smug, knowing look on his face, our smiles froze. It was Julian Vance. Surprised? Julian swirled the coffee in his cup, a fox-like grin on his face. "Didn't see that coming. Did you, Chloe? The investor you worked so hard to find is me." The color drained from Chloe's face. She instinctively moved to hide behind me. I stepped in front of her, my eyes locked on Julian. "What the hell do you want?" "What do I want?" Julian set his cup down and stood, slowly adjusting his tie. "Why? I want to help you, of course. I read your business plan. It's quite interesting. A scrap hauler and a fallen princess trying to start an urban mining empire. It's an inspiring story." His words dripped with sarcasm. "However," he continued, his gaze shifting to Chloe, becoming greedy and intense. "If you want my investment, there's one condition." "What is it?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. Julian smiled. He walked toward Chloe and reached out to touch her face. I slapped his hand away. He didn't seem to mind. He simply looked at Chloe and said, "It's simple. You, Chloe, come back and be my fiancée. You say yes, and I won't just give you $500,000. I'll give you $5 million without batting an eye." "In your dreams." Chloe burst out from behind me. "Julian, I would rather die than be with a person like you." "Is that so?" Julian's eyes turned cold. "What about your dear friend's sister? You don't care if she lives or dies." My whole body went rigid. He looked at me, his smile widening. "Jack Riley, I did some research. You have a sister in a care facility who desperately needs $500,000 for surgery, correct? What do you think will happen to her without that money?" "Julian, you bastard." I roared, my fists clenched so tight my knuckles turned white. "What am I doing?" He held his hands up in a gesture of mock innocence. "I'm just a businessman choosing not to invest in a project without a future. As for your sister, what does her life have to do with me?" He was backing us into a corner, using Luna's life to force Chloe's hand. "So what's it going to be, Chloe?" Julian asked her. "Swallow your pride and save 2 lives? Or cling to your ridiculous principles and watch the man you love and his sister go down in flames?" The coffee shop was dead silent. I could feel Chloe trembling beside me. I took her hand. It was ice cold. We're leaving, I said. We could earn the money some other way. I couldn't let Chloe walk back into that fire for me and my sister. Not so fast, Julian said, blocking our path. Think carefully, Chloe. This is a one-time offer. I also heard your half-brother, Ethan, is doing quite well at the company. Your father is planning to leave everything to him. You, my dear, have nothing. Chloe swayed on her feet. I steadied her. Don't listen to him. But she pulled her hand from mine and turned to face Julian. Her expression was calm, almost terrifyingly so. Okay, she said softly. I stared at her. What did you just say? I said okay, she repeated, looking Julian straight in the eye. I accept your condition, but you have to transfer the $500,000 to this account first. She recited the account number for the care facility. Chloe, are you insane? I grabbed her shoulders. Do you have any idea what you're saying? She didn't look at me. Her eyes were fixed on Julian. He laughed, a triumphant, ugly sound. Smart girl. No problem. He took out his phone and made the transfer right in front of us. A moment later, my phone buzzed with a text from the facility director. The $500,000 had been received. My heart sank to the bottom of my stomach. There, Julian said, putting his phone away. He held out his hand to Chloe. Now, shall we go, my dear fiancé? Chloe looked at me one last time. Her expression was full of things I couldn't decipher. Resolve, regret, and a strange flicker of cunning. Then she turned and walked toward Julian. I lunged for her, but Julian's bodyguards materialized and held me back. Jack, she said, pausing at the door and looking back at me with a sad smile. Take care of your sister. And our project. We will succeed. Then she was gone, disappearing out the door with Julian. I was pinned, forced to watch her walk away, completely powerless. A wave of pure rage washed over me. I broke free from the bodyguard's grip and slammed my fist into the coffee shop's plate glass window. The glass shattered, and my hand dripped with blood, but I couldn't feel a thing. The pain in my heart was a million times worse. I went back to the scrapyard like a zombie. Cannon and the others were terrified when they saw my bloody hand. Jack, what happened to you? Where's Chloe? I didn't answer. I locked myself in my room. I hated Julian, but I hated my own weakness even more. If I had money, if I was powerful, Chloe wouldn't have had to sacrifice herself. It was all my fault. I sat in the dark for an entire night. The next day, the facility called. Luna's surgery was scheduled for the following week. It was a success. I listened to the news without any expression on my face. I had traded Chloe's freedom for my sister's health. What kind of man did that make me? The next few days passed in a haze. I neglected the business, spending my time drinking and smoking. Cannon's attempts to talk to me were useless. Then, one evening, I received an anonymous text message. It contained only an address and a single sentence. If you want to save Chloe, be here. I stared at the address. The blood in my veins began to boil. It was Julian's private villa. I knew it was probably a trap, but I didn't hesitate for a second. I reached under my bed and pulled out a dusty, long-forgotten metal box. Inside was a military combat knife and a set of old, blood-stained fatigues. I changed into the uniform and slid the knife into my boot. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The man staring back had cold eyes and an aura of pure menace. I was no longer a scrap hauler. I was back on the battlefield. Julian Vance, you think your money can buy anything? Today, I'm going to teach you that some things aren't for sale. Things like a man's soul and my life. Julian's villa was perched on a hillside, surrounded by high walls and security. I didn't bother with the front gate. Under the cover of darkness, I moved like a shadow, scaling the 8-foot wall and dropping silently into the back garden. The villa was lit up, and I could faintly hear music and laughter from inside. He was throwing a party. I hid in the bushes, studying the layout of the house. I had to find Chloe. The text message had said she was likely in the easternmost room on the second floor. I circled around to the side of the villa, where a drain pipe ran right up to a second-floor balcony. Taking a deep breath, I gripped the pipe and began to climb, moving with a fluid, practiced agility. Within moments, I was on the balcony. The sliding glass door was unlocked. I slipped inside. The room was dark, lit only by the moonlight streaming through the window. I saw a figure curled up on the bed. It was Chloe. I moved quickly to her side and gently touched her shoulder. Chloe, it's me. She woke with a start. Her eyes widened first with relief, then with terror. Jack, what are you doing here? You have to leave. It's dangerous, she whispered urgently. I'm here to get you out, I said, taking her hand. Don't be afraid. I'm here. Her hand was freezing. You can't. She shook her head, tears welling up. Julian's downstairs. He'll kill us. He doesn't get a say, I said, pulling her up from the bed. Let's go. Just then, the bedroom door flew open, and the lights flickered on, blinding us. Julian stood in the doorway, flanked by a dozen bodyguards. He was holding a glass of red wine, a cruel, predatory smile on his face. Well, Jack Riley, I knew you'd come. I pushed Chloe behind me, my eyes fixed on him. So the text was from you. Of course, Julian said, taking a sip of wine. How else was I supposed to lure the hero into my trap? I just wanted to see how willing you were to die for this woman. He paused, his gaze shifting to Chloe, his expression turning venomous. And you, Chloe, I give you the best of everything, and you're still thinking about this piece of trash. It seems I've been too kind to you. You're a monster, Julian. Chloe spat, her body trembling with rage. I'm a monster? Julian laughed. And what is he? A failure who got his own sister crippled and was kicked out of the army in disgrace? Is he the good guy here? My blood ran cold. He had dug up my entire past. You can stop trying to get under my skin, I said calmly. I came here tonight ready to die. But I promise you, when I go down, I'm taking you with me. As I spoke, I pulled the combat knife from my boot. The polished steel glinted in the light. Julian's men tensed, some reaching for their own weapons. Julian's smirk faltered, but he quickly regained his composure. Are you trying to scare me? He sneered. You think one man with one knife could take on all of us? You're a veteran, Jack. You should know what a losing battle looks like. You can find out, I said, my gaze unwavering. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with my knife. Suddenly, Chloe rushed out from behind me, standing between us. Julian, let him go, she cried, spreading her arms to shield me. I'll do anything you want. Just let him go. Chloe, darling, are you begging me? Julian's smile returned. I do love it when you beg. He stepped toward her and grabbed her chin. But it's too late. Tonight, neither of you is walking out of here. He shoved her aside and barked at his men. Get him. Break his legs. I want him on his knees, watching while I show his woman what real affection is. The bodyguards surged forward. I pushed Chloe toward the corner. Stay there. Then, gripping my knife, I met their charge. The cramped room worked to my advantage. I moved like a tiger unleashed, the knife a blur of silver. I wasn't aiming to kill, but every slice was precise, disabling their hands and legs. Screams of pain filled the room. In less than a minute, half of them were on the floor, writhing in agony. The look on Julian's face had transformed from smug amusement to genuine terror. He backed away until his back was against the wall. I advanced on him, the knife in my hand dripping blood. Now it's your turn. You stay back, he shrieked. Killing me is a felony. You'll get the chair. My life is already worthless. Trading it for a Vance is a good deal, I said, my face a mask of cold fury. Just as the tip of my knife was about to touch his throat, the night was split by the sound of police sirens. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows, painting the room in chaos. Julian stared. Then a look of ecstatic relief washed over his face. The police. The police are here. Jack Riley, you are finished. Breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon. You're going to rot in prison for the rest of your life. I frowned. How did the cops get here so fast? Then I saw Chloe. She was leaning against the wall, her phone in her hand, a look of profound relief on her face. She had called them. It all clicked into place. She had never been a helpless victim. Agreeing to Julian's terms was a stalling tactic. She knew I would come for her, and she knew I couldn't win alone. So she had called the police. She had saved me. The police burst in and quickly took control of the scene. I was taken into custody, along with Julian and all of his injured men. Because Julian had set the trap and effectively kidnapped Chloe, my actions were considered self-defense. I might have used excessive force, but I wasn't the one in real trouble. Julian, on the other hand, was screwed. Not only was he facing kidnapping charges, but a search of his villa turned up a significant quantity of illegal drugs. It turned out he was running a number of illicit side businesses behind his family's back. This time, he had finally gone too far. By the time I was released from the station, the sun was rising. Chloe was waiting for me outside. The morning light made her look like an angel. We looked at each other and smiled. Nothing needed to be said. Let's go home, I said, holding out my hand. She placed her hand in mine and nodded firmly. Yes, home. News of Julian Vance's downfall spread through Detroit like wildfire. Vance Industries took a massive hit, its stock price plummeting. And the two people who had started it all returned to a quiet, broken-down scrapyard, as if nothing had happened. Life seemed to return to normal, but something fundamental had changed. The invisible wall between me and Chloe was gone. We started acting like a real couple. She cooked for me, though her food was still barely edible. I find myself gently placing a blanket over her when she fell asleep reading. For the first time, there were flowers growing in the small patch of dirt in the yard. Chloe had bought the seeds online. She said she wanted to bring a little color to the place. Cannon and the guys teased us relentlessly, saying I was like a rusty engine that had finally roared to life. I'd curse at them, but secretly, my heart felt full. Luna's recovery was progressing remarkably. The director of the facility said the surgery was a complete success. With continued therapy, she had a strong chance of regaining a normal life. I told Chloe the good news, and she was even happier than I was, jumping into my arms. That's wonderful. Jack, I knew everything would be okay. I held her close, feeling her warmth, and a sense of peace settled over me for the first time in years. But our peace was short-lived. With Julian's arrest, our investment in the urban mining project vanished. We were back at square one. Worse, Julian's father, Marcus Vance, chairman of Vance Industries, directed all of his rage at us. He used his immense influence to crush us. Overnight, our suppliers cut us off. Clients we had lined up canceled their contracts. The scrapyard's business dried up completely. We were once again facing ruin. That night, I stared at the empty yard and the bleeding red numbers in our ledger, a storm of frustration brewing inside me. I'm sorry, Jack, Chloe said quietly, sitting beside me. It's all my fault. I've dragged you into this. Don't be stupid, I said, pulling her into my arms. This isn't on you. The Vances are the monsters here. But what do we do now? I was silent. I was just a scrap hauler. All I had was my strength. Against a corporate giant like Marcus Vance, I was powerless. Looking at Chloe's worried face, I felt a profound sense of failure. I couldn't protect her. I couldn't give her the life she deserved. Maybe her being with me was a mistake from the start. Chloe, I said, the words heavy in my mouth. Maybe you should leave. She stiffened, looking at me in disbelief. Jack, what are you saying? Marcus Vance won't stop until he's destroyed us. If you stay with me, you'll only suffer, I said, my voice hoarse. You don't belong here. You deserve a better life. A better life? She laughed, a sound more painful than a sob. What kind of better life would it be without you? Tears streamed down her face. Jack, are you trying to get rid of me? Am I too much trouble? No, I denied it instantly. Then you must think I'm weak. She wiped her tears away, her eyes flashing with a defiant fire. Do you think I'm some fragile flower who can only share the good times? I'm not. She stood up, looking down at me. Jack Riley, you listened to me. For a long time, you protected me. Now it's my turn. With that, she turned and walked back into the house. I watched her go, my heart a maelstrom of emotions. The next morning, Chloe was up early. She put on makeup and changed into a crisp, professional suit, one of her old ones she'd kept packed away. In that moment, she was no longer the girl from the scrapyard. She was the radiant heiress of the Sterling family again. Where are you going? I asked. To fight, she said, giving me a smile filled with determination. She went to Sterling Corporation. She was going back to take what was rightfully hers. I knew it would be a brutal fight. Her half-brother, Ethan Sterling, had long considered the company his own. Her father had always been cold to her. For her to go back alone was like a lamb walking into a den of wolves. I couldn't stand the thought of it. I followed her. I watched her walk into the towering glass skyscraper of Sterling Corp, her small frame radiating an immense power. I waited for her in a coffee shop across the street. I waited all day. It wasn't until evening that she emerged, looking exhausted. Her face was pale, her eyes red and swollen. I rushed her aside. What happened? She seemed surprised to see me, then forced a weak smile. It's nothing. But I knew she was lying. I took her to a quiet diner, and after some gentle prodding, she told me what had happened. She had walked straight into a board meeting. In front of all the directors, she had exposed Ethan's crimes, embezzling company funds, cooking the books, and she had the evidence to prove it. It was information she had secretly gathered when she had interned at the company years ago. The boardroom was in an uproar, but her father, the chairman, chose to protect his son. He not only dismissed her evidence, but slapped her across the face in front of everyone, accusing her of being a greedy, manipulative liar trying to steal the family fortune. In the end, security escorted her from the building. He said he never considered me his daughter, Chloe whispered, fresh tears rolling down her cheeks. He said my mother was a tramp, and that I was just a bastard. A hot rage burned in my chest. I wanted to storm into Sterling Corp and beat that old man to a pulp. I pulled her into a tight hug, stroking her back. Don't cry. A man like that doesn't deserve to be your father. From now on, I'm your family. She cried even harder in my arms. After the tears subsided, she dried her eyes, her gaze becoming firm again. I'm not going to give up, she said. Tomorrow, I'm taking this evidence to the SEC. I looked at her, filled with admiration. This girl, who seemed so delicate, had a spirit of unbreakable steel. Good, I said. Whatever you do, I'm with you. But we had both underestimated the cruelty of her father and the viciousness of her brother. The next day, before Chloe could go to the authorities, the internet exploded with scandals about her. Stories claiming she was a mistress, that she had seduced her own brother-in-law for money. Vicious lies were accompanied by doctored photos, spreading like poison through social media. I knew it was Ethan's doing. Chloe became a public pariah. People pointed and whispered when she walked down the street. Someone spray-painted obscene insults on the gate of our scrapyard. Chloe locked herself in her room. She wouldn't eat, wouldn't drink, wouldn't speak. I could see she was at her breaking point. I couldn't let them break her. I went to Cannon. He used to run with a rough crowd and still had connections. I asked him for a favor, dig up every piece of dirt he could find on Ethan Sterling. I refused to believe that bastard was clean. A few days later, Cannon came back with a file. The information inside was staggering. Ethan wasn't just an embezzler. He was the man responsible for the demolition site accident all those years ago. He had deliberately orchestrated the accident to acquire the land for development. The foreman who had tricked my sister into working there was one of Ethan's men. Luna's legs, my sister's shattered life. It was all because of him. As Cannon laid the thick file on the table in front of me, I felt the blood freeze in my veins. The documents clearly detailed how Ethan Sterling had colluded with corrupt officials, ignored safety regulations, and then, after the collapse, bribed everyone necessary to have it all ruled an accident. And the foreman who lured Luna to her doom was Ethan's right-hand man. So that was it. It was never just a tragic accident. The man who destroyed my sister, my family, my entire life, was Chloe's own brother. The world suddenly felt impossibly, cruelly small. My hands trembled as I held the papers. A volcanic rage erupted from the depths of my soul, threatening to consume me whole. I was going to kill him. It was the only thought in my head. I stormed into my room and once again retrieved the metal box with the combat knife. "Jack, what are you doing?" Chloe appeared in the doorway, blocking my path and grabbing my hand. Her face was still pale, but her eyes were clear and sharp. "You're going after Ethan, aren't you?" I didn't speak, just glared at her. "You can't go," she pleaded, holding on to me tightly. "If you do that, it's your life for his. It's not worth it. Not worth it." I ripped my hand away, my voice a roar. My sister's future wasn't worth it. He destroyed everything I had. Why should he get a walk free? "I know you hate him. I hate him too," Chloe cried. "But we can't break the law to punish him. If we do, we're no better than he is. Get out of my way." "No." She spread her arms, blocking the door. "Jack, listen to me. We have evidence. We can go to the police. Let the law handle him. I promise you, he won't get away with it." "The law?" I sneered. "If the law worked, he'd already be in hell. Have you forgotten how your father protected him?" "This is different." Chloe snatched the file from my hand. "This evidence is enough to bury him forever. Jack, think about your sister. She's already lost her legs. Do you want her to lose her brother too?" "Luna." Her name was like a bucket of ice water dumped over my head. I sobered instantly. She was right. If I killed Ethan, my life was over too. What would happen to Luna? I was the only family she had left. I collapsed onto the floor, burying my face in my hands. Chloe came and wrapped her arms around me from behind. "Jack, don't be afraid. We'll face this together. I will help you get justice for your sister." Her voice was a soft whisper, but it gave me more strength than I could have imagined. I reached back, took her hand, and nodded. The next day, we went to the police station together. We handed over all the evidence. The department took the case very seriously, immediately forming a task force to investigate Ethan Sterling and the Sterling Corporation. Ethan was taken into custody within days. His father pulled every string he had to get him out, but the evidence was irrefutable. No one could save him this time. During the investigation, the police uncovered evidence linking Ethan to multiple cases of bribery and even other deaths. The handsome, polished heir was, in reality, a monster. At the same time, Chloe held a press conference. In front of the entire city's media, she systematically dismantled the lies and rumors that had been spread about her, presenting clear evidence of Ethan's smear campaign. She told the story of her life, of her mother, of the years of neglect and cruelty. The timid girl I had found in the rain was gone. In her place stood a warrior, bathed in the flash of camera lights, fearlessly reclaiming her story. Public opinion shifted in an instant. Sympathy poured out for Chloe, while disgust was heaped upon the Sterling family. The company's stock went into a nosedive, and it teetered on the edge of bankruptcy. Marcus Vance, implicated in Ethan's illegal dealings, was also taken in for questioning. In one short month, the power structure of Detroit had been shaken to its core. The untouchables had been brought down. Ethan Sterling was found guilty of numerous crimes and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Chloe's father was also incarcerated for his role in the cover-up and for tax evasion. Chloe took control of the failing Sterling Corporation and began the long process of restructuring it. When the dust finally settled, she took me to her mother's grave. It was in a quiet, peaceful cemetery. The headstone was immaculate. "Mom, I'm here," she said, kneeling and tracing the face in the photograph. "I got justice for you. Don't worry about me. I'm going to be okay." She turned to me and smiled. "And I brought someone to meet you. This is Jack, the man I love. He's a good man, Mom. He takes good care of me." I walked to her side and knelt, bowing my head respectfully to the woman in the photograph. "Ma'am, you have my word. I will spend the rest of his grave." It was in a quiet, peaceful cemetery. The headstone was immaculate. "Mom, I'm here," she said, kneeling and tracing the face in the photograph. "I got justice for you. Don't worry about me. I'm going to be okay." She turned to me and smiled. "And I brought someone to meet you. This is Jack, the man I love. He's a good man, Mom. He takes good care of me." I walked to her side and knelt, bowing my head respectfully to the woman in the photograph. "Ma'am, you have my word. I will spend the rest of my life loving and protecting her." Sunlight streamed through the leaves, dappling the grass around us. I looked at Chloe's profile and felt a profound sense of peace. The storm was over. Sterling Corporation was reborn under Chloe's leadership. She was ruthless in her efficiency, cutting in profitable ventures and refocusing the company on its core strengths. She was a whirlwind of meetings, contracts, and decisions. I watched her grow thinner and more tired, and my heart ached for her. "Don't work so hard," I'd say, massaging her tense shoulders. She would lean back against me, exhausted. "I have to. The company is still fragile. It's all on me right now. What can I do to help?" She'd turn, kiss me gently, and say, "Just being here for me to come home to every night is all the help I need." I held her tighter. The scrapyard was back in business, too. And with Chloe's help securing a bank loan, our urban mining project was finally a reality. I built a professional dismantling facility and hired more people. I was no longer just Jack, the guy who hauled junk. I was the owner of an environmental tech company, though I still prefer to wear a tank top and work boots and get my hands dirty alongside my crew. People talked. They said Chloe was a CEO and I was a scrap hauler, though we didn't belong together. I never said anything, but a part of me felt insecure. Chloe knew. One evening, she pulled me in front of a mirror. She was wearing a stunning designer suit, looking every bit the powerful executive. I was in my grease-stained work clothes. We looked like two people from different planets. "Jack, look at me," she said. I met her eyes in the reflection. "Do you really think we don't belong together?" I didn't answer. She turned to face me, cupping my face in her hands. In my heart, there's no CEO and no scrap hauler. There's only Chloe and Jack. Her voice was soft but firm. "When I was at my lowest, when I had nothing and no one, you took me in. You protected me. Every single scar on your body is 1,000 times more attractive to me than any designer suit." "Jack," she said, her eyes shining, "you are my hero. You always will be." My eyes started to burn. I lowered my head and kissed her. In the entire world, she was the only one who truly saw me. Luna's recovery was going well. Her mind was healing, and she could now communicate like a normal teenager. She was fitted with prosthetic legs and, with the help of a physical therapist, was learning to walk with crutches. I brought her to live with us in Detroit and hired tutors for her. She was smart and learned quickly. She adored Chloe, trailing after her like a little shadow. Our home was finally filled with laughter. I used to think my life was a scrap heap, but now, on that heap, the most beautiful flowers were blooming. On Chloe's birthday, I spent weeks planning a surprise. I decorated the scrapyard with fairy lights and balloons. I baked her a cake myself. It was lopsided and ugly, but it was mine. I even built her a one-of-a-kind robot sculpture out of polished chrome and copper parts. When she came home from work and saw it all, she gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Do you like it?" I asked. She nodded, her eyes glistening. I got down on one knee and pulled a small box from my pocket. Inside was a ring I had forged and polished myself from a piece of scrap titanium. It wasn't expensive, but it held all the love in my heart. "Chloe," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm not a man of fancy words. All I know is that when I was at my worst, when I was barely even a person, you found me. You pulled me out of the mud and made me feel human again. Everyone says that I rescued you, but the truth is you rescued me. So, Chloe Sterling," I asked, my heart pounding, "will you marry this scrap hauler?" Tears were streaming down her face. She held out her hand and nodded fiercely. "Yes, I will." I slid the ring on her finger, stood up, and pulled her into my arms. Cannon and the guys whistled and cheered. Luna clapped her hands in delight. The stars were beginning to appear in the twilight sky. Holding Chloe in my arms, I knew I was the luckiest man in the world. Our wedding was a simple affair. No fancy hotel, no crowd of strangers. We held it right there in the yard of the scrapyard. We invited all our employees and their families and the director and staff from Luna's care facility. Chloe wore a simple white dress I'd had tailor-made for her. She wore no jewelry, only a single white rose from our garden in her hair. She was the most beautiful bride I had ever seen. I stood there in a stiff new suit, my palms sweating. Luna was our flower girl. Leaning on her crutches, she walked slowly and steadily down the makeshift aisle, carrying our rings. She smiled like an angel. We exchanged rings, and, surrounded by the cheers of our friends and family, we kissed. We didn't go on a honeymoon. Chloe said that as long as she was with me, anywhere was the Maldives. Married life was peaceful and happy. She was still the formidable CEO, and I was still the grease-stained boss. But every night, we came home to each other, ate dinner together, and helped Luna with her physical therapy. Our company grew. We acquired several failing electronics factories and converted them into state-of-the-art recycling facilities, creating hundreds of jobs. We also started a foundation to help victims of industrial accidents, people like Luna. Chloe always said that we had come from the dirt, and we could never forget those still struggling in it. A few years later, Chloe got pregnant. It was a boy. I was a nervous wreck, spending hours talking to her belly. The day our son was born, I paced outside the delivery room like a caged animal. When a nurse finally brought him out, I was so scared I didn't know how to hold him. He was so tiny, red, and wrinkled like a little old man. But to me, he was the most perfect thing I had ever seen. We named him Cole. Luna loved her new nephew, always fighting to hold him. She was doing wonderfully. She had not only regained her cognitive abilities, but had also been accepted into college to study fashion design. She promised she would spend her life making beautiful clothes for me, Chloe, and little Cole. One sunny afternoon, I sat in a rocking chair in our yard. I watched Chloe watering her flowers while Luna helped a toddling Cole take his first shaky steps. He stumbled toward me and fell into my arms, giggling and yelling, "Dada!" I held him tight, looking at my wife and my sister just a few feet away. My heart was filled with a peace I had never known. I once thought my life was destined to be like the scrap metal I collected, rusting away in some dark, forgotten corner. But Chloe was like a ray of light, illuminating my entire world. She taught me that even scrap metal could be refined into gold. She made me believe that even a man like me deserved to be happy. They say finding a woman like that will work a rough man to the bone. They're right. For these three people, my family, I'd break my back 1,000 times over and thank God for the chance.